Chris Permiano is out of town and has requested that we dial him in remotely. I determined that he has sufficient reason to dial in. We need a vote of the board though. So motion to allow Mr. Permiano to participate remotely.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? If he answers, everything will be roll call for the rest of the.
Hello?
Chris, you there?
Yeah.
Okay, you were on with the board, and we voted to allow you to be in remote participation.
Okay, perfect.
Can you hear everybody fine?
Again, I'll
Thank you, Chris.
It was not a unanimous vote to let you in, Chris.
Point. You'll have to check the next minutes to see who,
Wow.
So the first item on the agenda is the minutes from January 16th. I actually don't have them in my notebook, so.
No, the recording secretary is currently out on medical leave, so
Okay.
we're a little backed up on
Got
that. But we hope to have them at the next meeting.
Perfect, so we will skip that for now. The next item on the agenda is the applicable subdivision board performance bond reduction request for Winter Woods, Brookfield Village. I will turn that over to Jim to tell us where we are on this one.
Thank you. This was tabled from, I believe, 2 meetings ago. We had an opportunity to review a letter that was sent on behalf of some of the residents at Brookfield Village and have taken sort of an additional review of the bond reduction request. And we've added in some additional funds to handle some items that are either not complete or partially complete that we are in agreement with as well. So I want to say we've added in an additional $40,000 plus to the previous amount that Pulte had requested. And the new bond amount for the reduction request is $125,454.41.
So they had requested a reduction to about 85,000 and.
I believe it was around 78,
Okay.
so we've added in over 40,000 to cover some additional items. There was additional funds added into some loam and seed item, although a lot of areas were loam and seeded, they just really haven't taken yet, or there was some areas that just were under construction activity and really just never had a chance. So we've had some additional funds there, as well as there's a access path that actually comes from Calman Road. And although much of the path is within the Woodstone Crossing project, it was actually within this bond, and that still needs to be complete. So we've added the full value of that in here as well. 2 other smaller items. One was a lighting item. I believe there's one light that has not been working, so we've added some money to cover that for any repairs that need to be made. And then there's some additional funding for bituminous curbing. Pulte had installed a different type of berm, and so we're trying to get some resolution to see which preferred berm will be, in favor of the residents going forward. So we've left some funds in there to handle that as well, just until that can get resolved.
And were you able to sort of follow up with the residents or their smaller HOA on these items to discuss what we did?
Yeah, working through Brittany, she's been a great point of contact for the residents. I met with a few different residents to kind of go through the concerns, and I think we've got it to a point where we're comfortable with moving forward at this point.
Brittany, are you satisfied?
Yeah,
with-
agreed.
Okay.
I have one question, Jim. What's the Stone Tech chamber system? That hasn't been installed. I saw that $15,000.
The chambers actually were installed. There were some additional chambers that were installed that were in addition to the original plans that were approved.
Okay.
The short story is that one of the detention basins is not functioning properly. And so the chambers that were installed need to be reinstalled.
Okay.
So that was a way to sort of get the funds back into the bond with that particular line item,
All right, thanks, Jim.
rather than creating a new line item.
Yeah, that's not, I understand.
I just want to say that we were going to, as a board, approve, a bunch of money that hasn't really been done. And I want to thank Jim, who
who put a stop to it, is Jim, who has got virtually no inspection authority here. It really falls to municipalities, and the ball was dropped, and we were going to approve it until the resident said something, and Jim took it in hand to stop it. And so, if we ever do start building here, I think it's incumbent upon us to, work with Weymouth and Jim and anyone else to make sure that this doesn't happen. That's it. That's my speech.
I think you're right, I think that there have been some, we still have reason to be on the inspectional service, even if
Yeah.
we're not formally the inspectors. This isn't the first time that we've run into an issue like this, and they typically come to light with the performance bond reductions.
I'll make a motion that the applicable subdivision board approves the reduction of the Pulte Homes for New England LLC's bond number SUR 2310075 for the Winter Woods project, AKA Brookfield Village, to $125,454.41 to authorize the executive director to execute any related writers.
Second.
Any additional discussion from the board? Okay, we'll have to do a roll call vote. Kevin?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
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 Yes. Chris?
yes,
That's unanimous. Staying with the applicable subdivision board, the next item is the certificate of action extension request for the Beam Street definitive subdivision plan.
Thank you. The original approval for the Beam Street definitive subdivision plan was on January 23rd of 2017. At that time, the board approved the plans, and at that time only required a bond for the interim condition. And as the board may know, you've had a handful of these projects come before you now since that time, where you have an interim and a final or full build condition for the roadways. The applicant, L-Star, had 2 years to complete the project in its full condition. There were also several temporary waivers that were granted at that time, and those were also set to expire after 2 years in conjunction with completion of the improvements. The 2-year window is now up, and the work has not been completed. L-Star has submitted a request, which they're allowed to do under the terms of your approval. L-Star has submitted a request for an additional 1 year on the approval to complete the improvements. There is a recommendation from staff to allow the extension, subject to bonding the full scope of the project, and to also have that bond in place prior to March 1st.
What happens if we don't approve the extension?
I just want to do that's exactly what's gonna happen.
You could pull the bond, work with a surety company, go through significant effort to go after the remaining funds. It's about $162,000 that's still on the bond. And then again, that was really to complete the interim condition. Much of that money is really related to street lighting at this point. The binder course is down, drainage is in, utilities are in the ground, but street lighting has not been completed. So much of that funding would be used to complete the street lighting portion of the project.
And
So that would be your alternative, would be to call the bond and then to pursue the project on our own.
And what's the difference between the amount on the existing bond and what we would need bonded for the final conditions?
We don't have an engineer's estimate for that, but it would include the final paving, as well as some landscaping and irrigation work. So it could be an additional $200,000 to $300,000 on top of that.
Lindsay,
Yes.
are we sure that L-Star can get an additional bond on this, for this project?
I assume if they can't transact business by March 1st, they'd be unable to secure that additional bond. I don't know that as a fact.
I don't know.
Tom, do you know if you can get bonds right now?
I don't know, I'd have to look into it. I don't know. It's a good
Where,
question.
if that's the case, should this be tabled until we know definitively that they can get a bond?
We put the condition of the bond on there, then if they can't,
Oh,
if they can't,
I
if
mean,
they
if they
can't
can't
meet,
meet
if
it,
they can't meet the condition,
then we're back to potentially pulling the existing bond and at least completing the interim
Gotcha.
conditions.
That's correct.
And do the interim conditions make, I believe would determine the timing they make the roads drivable and safe from a public safety perspective for the lighting. I think it was just more of, it was largely cosmetic. I don't wanna say just cosmetic, but it was having the plantings and the irrigation and sort of the final
Right.
plan. So this,
But they don't like that.
It's snowing.
It's 45. It's chilly out here.
I guess I'd come back a step and want to clarify the role that keep current employees in asking for the extension, and does it have kind of full force of effect that it implies that you can get the bond at this point in time, and defer for a clarification on that?
Just want to make sure, I don't know if I heard your question. You're referring to who actually signed the extension?
Yeah, and, you know, you're
Keith
you're
signed the
implying,
Oh,
extension
yeah.
request.
Yeah,
implying, do you have the authority to bond?
I don't know that by virtue of Keith signing that, he's implying that he has the ability. It's a good question. I think if I could, I think that the issue is probably what remains to be completed in the full build-out, and if it's at or below, what was the amount?
162.
162, so it might be, I mean, that's certainly something we could get tomorrow to find out, to get an engineer's estimate, what's the amount to complete, that way you wouldn't actually have to increase the bond. Does that make sense?
I think we're increasing the bond because we know that the lighting and a couple other things that aren't finished to date would exhaust the $162,000, and that's before we get to the irrigation, the final paving, everything else. So the question isn't whether or not we have to increase the amount of bond. I think it's what the magnitude is, and I think in Jim's sort of professional experience, it could be somewhere closer to the 150, 200,000 mark, or it could be closer to the 300,000 mark. We don't know where that is. So if you have that information, we could, you know, have a more exact number on the additional bond we were asking for the final conditions, but.
It's an estimate, but without solid bids, it's really just that. We've seen engineers' estimates, they can vary quite a bit. Until you actually have competitive bids on the table, then you really know what you're doing. But I think it would certainly be of some help to us at this point to understand what would be required for the full condition.
So if they can't produce the bond, we're no worse off March 1st than we are today.
Right.
And realistically, if we started pulling the bond from the surety company, we wouldn't be starting construction until the spring anyway, so it's, I presume not a material delay if we wait until March 1st.
That's correct.
We could still go through the same process and we could decide to finish the road. It kind of gives us a nice timeline to decide to pull the bond and finish the road in the spring.
So I'll make a motion to table, based on being able to supply the board with a performance bond on this project moving forward.
I think that is the motion, though, to
Yeah, I don't think
accept
we
it
wanna-
pending, how's it written? It's like-
Yeah, I think it's written such that if we approve this tonight, they don't get the extension unless they give us a bond by March 1st. And if they don't give us an additional bond by March 1st, they're in default of their obligations on this particular project, and we can pool the existing bond to at least finish the interim conditions to make this a drivable, walkable, safe roadway.
That's correct.
I can pull my motion back if this is,
Okay.
I would try my motion.
I'll make a motion that the applicable subdivision board approve a 1-year extension of the time of completion for all work associated with the Beam Street definitive subdivision plans dated January 23rd, 2017 as revised. This extension applies to any temporary waiver, also applies to any temporary waivers that were granted within the original approval. All work associated with the, quote, full build condition, end quote, shall be completed by January 23rd, 2020. The applicant shall post a performance bond for all of the remaining work. The bond and its corresponding construction cost estimate shall be in a form acceptable to both the authority and the town of Weymouth. The bond shall name the authority and the town of Weymouth as obligees. If the performance bond is not posted on or before March 1st, 2019, this approval of the extension shall be null and void.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Roll call vote, Kevin?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
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 Yes. Chris?
Yes,
Thank you. Thanks for your work and explanation on that, Jim.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the treasurer's report, policies and procedures discussion. Eric, is there information for tonight?
We skipped one.
Oh, we skipped the parkway maintenance. My bad. Parkway, okay, next on the item on the agenda is the parkway maintenance agreement, discussion and possible vote regarding master developer obligations. So just by way of background on this item, when the parkway, I believe it was simultaneous with the closing of all of the financing on the parkway, we entered into an agreement with the master developer by which we would essentially own the road, and they would pay the SRA for the operation and maintenance of the road, which includes irrigation and snow removal and, you know, road repairs and all of the typical sort of operation and maintenance. But because we own the road, how it's worked throughout the past is we have contracted for the operation and maintenance on the road, and we've invoiced L-Star, and they're legally required under this agreement to reimburse us for it. We haven't been paid this year, or in 9-10 months. For the better part of a year, we haven't been paid under the agreement. We've come to learn that All-Star sort of curiously assigned its obligations to pay us to the Landowners Association. And I'll let either Paul or David, who have looked even more into this issue than I have, speak if they have anything to add. But essentially, we're interested in getting a legal opinion as to what our options are here to try to recover these funds.
Yes, technically, we're owed money from the SLA. L-Star is the majority interest in that organization, so without their ability to transact, it's unclear how that, if they were to not meet their obligations, it's unclear how those obligations would fall and be spread on the remaining members. So I think it would be advisable is just to get an outside opinion, outside counsel, take a look at the agreement that's attached to the deed, so that the residents will have, will protect our interests, getting paid, and the residents hopefully will be more informed.
So what we're essentially asking for tonight is the permission for Paul to, I'll admit, we've discussed this internally in our non-expertise in this area, lawyer minds, and in David's extensive research on this, and we're at a dead end for what our options are here, and have decided we would need to retain outside legal counsel in order to analyze what our options are here.
Just a question. On the assignment, according to the agreement, it says L-Star can assign to a third party that is not an L-Star affiliate upon written consent of the authority to such assignment. Did we give them a consent?
We have no record of that.
Okay. Not the lawyer's determined.
Yeah, and as far as our records show, there was not a consent to that assignment. And, you know, this is going to be a sort of ongoing issue if there's ambiguity about who has to pay this amount, because in a typical year with snowfall and the other operation and maintenance, I think we're at about $60,000 in debt, maybe it's closer to $70,000, $80,000. I mean, it's about a $100,000 a year liability, give or take, that there's ambiguity right now as to, we take the position that L-Star has to pay us that money, and they actually want to sort of pawn it off on the Landowners Association by assignment that was not consented to by any landowners in the association other than L-Star or by the SRA. So the motion on the board, the motion that I'm going to make is to authorize Paul to get a legal opinion from an expert in the area regarding the obligations under this.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
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 Yes. Chris?
Yes.
Thank you all. Now we're at the treasurer's report.
So, thank you and good evening. As you had heard previously by the auditors, they had asked us to move forward with trying to adopt some policies and procedures. Last week, and I apologize that I was unable to be here, I had a death of a close friend. There's an anti-fraud policy, which is one of the larger items that they addressed with their audit. This was in your packets last week, and if you've had a chance to get a look at it or make any comments, I'd like to amend and start taking a look at a formal final on this for you to adopt. There was some, I did give this to an insurance agent that I've worked with in the past, and he did have a couple suggestions. The first one is in several areas is what is undefined as an investigative unit. And typically the internal accountant serves as the auditor as well. But I leave this up to you to define who you'd like as the investigative unit. I asked the executive director. He said that he would be fine with me doing it, but I'm open to anybody being the investigative unit. The other thing that he had mentioned was on the confidentiality section under 6 is that on the second paragraph, after investigative results will not be disclosed or discussed, he wanted me to insert in there to the extent of the law, because I believe in sexual harassment cases you may need to go outside of the parameters of what that paragraph says. Outside of that, this pretty much just defines what is wrongdoing and the investigative procedures for it. It's typically handed out to all the employees as well as all the board members, and then they sign that they agree to this. If anybody has any input as to what you would like the investigative unit, unless you want me to handle it, I'd be more than glad to amend this to whatever you'd like, or if you've got any other suggestions on this, I'm open to it.
So, just a couple things. I don't have any problem with that conceptually, although a lot of times I know, especially in smaller organizations with only a few employees, sometimes it is a subcommittee of the board, or at least in conjunction with some sort of subset of the board that's done, and that's more just for protection of the personnel who are more likely to be involved or, potentially affected by what's going on, to have the board sort of make the decision. I frankly, usually to engage an outside person, because it's going to be virtually impossible, I think, to have sort of a proper investigation, not because of competence, but just because everyone sort of knows and is familiar with everyone to have that done. So that's my first thought.
It defaults initially to the executive director, but this is either in conjunction with that, or if it involves the executive director also. So typically that's what the investigative unit is for. So
I'm inclined to hope that this would be, and with a small staff, we probably won't have sort of, we don't have 500 people where we're going to have sort of complaints coming in at the clip of a few a year. I'm curious, and maybe we should consult with sort of counsel on this, if we could just have it so that any sort of reported issue is brought to the board or to the 3 members of the board or something of that nature to decide how to proceed with an investigation.
The only thing I caution with is you wouldn't want to bring it to the board, because if it's fraud, you'd want to make sure that you don't flag that to anybody. If I may make a suggestion, I would say that you might want to consider having either the chair or the vice chair be the investigative unit, and then whoever he or she would like to involve with that, you could go from there.
I'd be comfortable with that. I think the only thing, we'd have to put a relief on what if it's the vice chair or the chair that's in question?
I feel like you always need a couple people, so that's why I was thinking, should it be like a vice chair, chair, clerk? You can go to any of the 3 type of
Yes.
situation.
Yes.
I think that gives enough cover, and also gives sort of a meaningful opportunity for, if an employee has a problem with the executive director, they may not want to go to either the executive director or the alternative person in a small organization.
So should I make it the officers of the board of directors Okay.
I think sort of any officer of the board of directors.
I'll make those amendments then and put this before you again next week. That way you can put it to a vote. Is there anything else?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna send a couple edits on the confidentiality that are just more intended from an employee protection standpoint. Just a couple of changes that I think under the existing law we should make that have some carve outs for, and I think they transition well into the whistleblower policy, but I think the confidentiality policy needs some tweaking to ensure that, that the employees have their rights protected.
Great, thank you. I appreciate your input on that. And I will be bringing forward a couple other different policies. I've also pulled together some bylaws for a lot of the different authorities that are throughout the state, and took a look at those and tried to condense it down to something very simple. And I'll put that before you next meeting that you have, and I'll try and email it out to you ahead of time so you can all take a look at that and edit it whichever way you'd like, and give me your input.
On the confidentiality piece, and I think it's appropriate, is that it has to do with a board member, that their appointing authority is notified. I mean, we want to say confidential, but if there is fraud after the post investigation it is identified, we'd want to be able to notify the appointing authority. And I think that should be clearly, is that written somewhere and I just didn't see it, Eric, or?
No, matter of fact, the appointing authority is not in here, and that's a great suggestion. Thank you. I'll try and find where it is that would be written in. I also believe it does default out to the Attorney General at some point in time, but the appointing authority should probably be notified at some point in time. I'm just not sure where. Perhaps you could look at that when you're looking at the other things. I would greatly appreciate
I
that.
think that makes sense
Yeah.
for certain.
That was a question that I had, is there no boilerplate from the AG's office? I know we're kind of an unusual kind of an organization, but it's surprising it doesn't exist, okay.
Anti-fraud policy, I get this actually from the auditors.
Okay, you would think the AG's office would have one, you know, like an ethics, this is your boilerplate, there is no boilerplate though. Okay.
Yeah, they tend to actually not give out stuff like that from the state agencies, I find.
That's true. They
But
give
I
us
will-
like
I will
one-off
absolutely take a look.
statutes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
They'll give you
Well,
like your
Yeah.
maternity leave policy or your like
no
one-off
SRP,
statutes, but
oh,
they don't.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In conjunction with this also, I'll be taking a look, once we get through these different policies, and I'll put forward finance policies based on what you do with the bylaws as well, and then I'll come up with the actual specific procedures to follow for finance afterwards. And that's it for me.
Great, thank you for your work on these. I think this is important and, you know, it's something we've talked about for a while and it's important to start with the first draft. So I appreciate the pen to paper on this. Next item on the agenda is the executive director's report.
Thank you. Just want to let the board know, 2 weeks ago, at the invitation of Peter Foreman, the South Shore Chamber of Commerce, had an opportunity to go over and speak with Peter Hebert, who left the Mass Biotech Council to take over Mass Econ, which is an organization that sort of markets Massachusetts as a place for business outside of the state. So we had a good discussion over there. There may be some things we can partner on going forward. Last week, had the opportunity to go to the South Shore Economic Development Commission and South Shore Chamber of Commerce had a half-day retreat in the morning. So I was appointed as a trustee to the SSEDC. And last minute, one of Peter's facilitators pulled out of the morning, so I got to facilitate a 2-hour session with those, with the chamber and the SSEDC. And it was a great way to get to know people in the business community. So that was a good thing to attend. Anyways,
And you represented it well, and you sparked a lot of interest. I thought that's exactly what had to be done, and it's amazing to see the amount of people that still don't understand this project and the value of this project.
yes, and so the final thing I have is just that it's that time of year again to do the ethics training, that take that online test that you can't fail. So I'll be sending out more detailed information on that. And that's it, thank you.
And thank you for attending those. I think this is exactly the type of thing that was on the checklist of not getting done at all when we didn't have a full-time sort of daytime presence here. So that exposure for the project is really valuable and we appreciate your initiative on finding those opportunities. There are no additional topics that weren't anticipated before the agenda. Public comment on topics from tonight's meeting. Yes.
Just want to say thank you to Jim for meeting with the residents on the Brookfield Village bonding. It really did help us fully understand the process of this and everything, and I look forward to hopefully a smoother process in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, and thanks for your effort in spearheading that on behalf of the residents. All right, seeing no further, our next meeting is actually next week, because we're gonna go back to our first and third, so our next meeting is on the 6th of February, and we'll keep that meeting. The next item on the agenda is an executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if any open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. And tonight it'll be not to reconvene in open session. I've reviewed the reasons along with council and the executive director and have determined that we meet these criteria to convene an executive session tonight. So we will need a roll call vote to enter executive session. Kevin?
Yes.
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 Yes. Chris?
Yes.
Great. So thank you all. We'll give a few minutes to clear the room.